Well, I'm here with Roseanne. For my dedicated listeners, they know that she's my best friend, Roseanne. And Roseanne and I we are going to talk about why why I'm doing this podcast, Soulful Connections. I thought she could help me figure it out. I'm not entirely sure, and I figured Roseanne can help. By the way, as I say this, we're on Zoom. I think Roseanne is frozen because she is looking at me with an unchanging but interested expression. But I think she just came back. In any case, um, Roseanne, first of all, welcome and thanks for coming back on to Soulful Connections.
Well, it's always fun to talk to you. That's for sure.
So I have to say, from the early days during the pandemic, I thought it was a perfect time because I had a minute to work on things that I'd always wanted to do. And I just didn't know what they were. I thought, I kind of wanted to do a book because I had been in this intense situation with one of my daughters in the hospital. She was in the hospital in critical care for many months. And I always thought once we kind of shook the dust off of that situation and I looked at the lessons, I thought, I really want to share some of what I've learned. Go ahead, say it.
I sometimes think we should just talk about that. That was such an
Yeah.
amazing, such a difficult event in your life that really changed your life. And I sometimes think we should talk about just that alone.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe start there. Maybe we can talk about it because I think that kind of explains why. Why did I start Soulful Living? And why did I start this connection? So basically, my middle daughter, Clara, was born by all appearances healthy. And she always had some weird things, like she couldn't be on her tummy. And there were just certain things that didn't feel right. And I would say things to the pediatrician, and the pediatrician would just say, you know what? All kids are different, because I was kind of comparing her to my other firstborn daughter. And I just thought I was crazy. Honestly, I just thought I was crazy. Like I would have these weird thoughts that I hesitate to say, but I'll just, I was reading a book about sisters to my one daughter, and I was thinking, what if her sister dies? What if she dies? And that felt, I would say, why am I thinking that? I would have these weird thoughts. And finally, she got a horrible cold, RSV, but we didn't know it was RSV. We just knew it was a bad cold, and it felt very ominous. It felt scary. And I took her to a different pediatrician because my pediatrician was away, and I was crying. I thought something terrible was happening. I felt a terrible sense of foreboding, and he just diminished my concerns. He said, "Are you a first-time mother?" And I said, "No." And I said, "Please, can you give her some Tylenol? Her fever was so high." And he said, "No, we don't give that out here. And just go get her cough medicine and she'll be fine." She was 7 months. And then I took her home, and she was breathing in a way that I cannot even explain.
Yeah. And can I just say that you called me
Yes.
during that event?
Yes.
And I remember vividly that conversation. And my response to you was, "Oh my God, is that Clara breathing in the background?" And you said, "Yes." And I said, "Amanda, that is not right. Like, that is so alarming. That's so, like, I have 3 kids too. Like, I've never heard anything like that. That was the most disturbing thing.
And I called you. You were living, I think, in Michigan at the time, right?
I was.
And why it's here, it's like 11 o'clock at night. My husband, he worked overnights. So he was working. I had my one little girl asleep, and then I was just holding Clara. And doing everything like steam and everything that you do that they tell you to do. But I was in complete terror. Every cell in my body felt terrified. And I didn't know what to do. And so, of course, what do? You call your friend in Michigan.
Yeah.
And the weird thing is, I thought, you know what? She's probably sleeping,
Yeah, I never answer my phone late at night. Never. Except that
right?
night, for whatever reason. I think Jeff and I were coming home from somewhere, so we were out kind of late. And yeah, it
Yes.
was just amazing that I got that call.
Yeah.
Really.
And you said, take her to the emergency room.
Yeah.
And what happened was, as soon as my husband came home, I took her so that he would be home with my other daughter. And then it all began. And, I won't go through all of that because it's just long and, nobody really wants to hear it. But I will say at the end of everything, um, we ended up in, well, I will actually say something because I did learn a lesson. We ended up in CHOP. They kind of were trying to fix it. We were on the general floor. Um, I was trying to believe what they were telling me, which was like, yeah, this is really bad, but you'll be fine. She'll be fine. Ultimately, after a few days, which was really, it was a horrible time because I really felt, I can't express it enough. I felt complete abject terror, but I was surrounded by professionals who were telling me that there was no need to feel terrified. So I went home and it was Super Bowl Sunday. And I remember that because I thought, it's still not good. I want to believe them, but it's not good. So at this point, I called another friend, Lorraine, because she worked in emergency. And I was like, do I bring her in again, Lorraine? She hasn't been drinking. This is what's happening. And my friend said, yeah, but go to a CHOP hospital. You need to go. And she directed me to a different hospital, which was Grandview. It was in this area, but not the one I would normally go to. And at that hospital, one thing really struck me, and it was this. The emergency care doctor looked at me and she said, okay, we're sending you to intensive care because your daughter has been struggling to breathe for weeks. She is going to stop breathing. And when she stops, I want her in intensive care. So of course I didn't want that to be true. And I was, praying and just hoping that she was wrong. But I felt like she was telling me the truth. You know that thing, Roseanne, where somebody tells you something and it doesn't matter if you want it to be true or not, there is this kind of visceral knowing that it's true.
Sure. And especially as mothers, we need to really pay attention to that.
Yeah.
Because even when they're older, because I can attest to this side of it, and you just think, this isn't right. This doesn't look right. This doesn't sound right, even though there's no true proof. And professionals are saying, oh, it's all right. Don't worry. And you just know, you just feel it. You don't want to,
Yeah.
like you said. So you sort of listen to everybody else because you don't really want it to be true what you're really thinking. So as
Yes,
mothers, we have to listen to that because we're
we
almost
do.
always right.
You
Almost
know,
always right.
when I left, just at the end of this, I was thinking back on lessons that I learned. And that was and the reason I wanted to share that story as we're talking is because I think that's a really important lesson for all of us, no matter who you are. When you hear truth, you know it.
That's right.
And when you know it, don't argue with yourself, accept that there is a sense of knowing with certain things and trust yourself, you
Yeah, I was just
know,
going to say that. You got to trust it. You
you got
really
to
do.
trust yourself. Yeah.
Hmm.
So ultimately that did happen. We were in intensive care and she did stop breathing and she was intubated. And it was a really long, we were in intensive care for about a half a year because what they uncovered was that my daughter was very creatively constructed internally. and she ultimately ended up needing open heart surgery. And she had something called long stem tracheostenosis with complete rings, which just means this: she had an airway the size of a coffee straw, and it had rings all around it. So we were told she couldn't survive. We were told, she wouldn't live. And thus began this, really, really long time. And I have to say, another great lesson was friendship, because I will never forget, Roseanne. Um, the elevator door opened one day, and I just remember you stepped out, and I remember like you had these furry boots because I was in such, it was such a traumatic experience. And Victor and I were there every single day. Basically, I lived there. He brought my other daughter there after preschool every day so that the family could be together. And then on the 8th day, he usually slept over, and then I would be home with my other poor little, 4-year-old. But you stepped out and had nowhere to go but my room, or Clara's room, really, essentially. And we just sat there, together. I didn't have a great deal of hospitality to offer you.
Well, that was the whole point, of just to come and just to be there, because I know what it's like to have a kid in the hospital and have other children at home, and you're so pulled between them. It's like when you're home, you're dying to get home to be with your other child, and then as soon as you get home, you're dying to get back to the hospital to be with the one that's sick, and there's just this terrible feeling. And I remember sometimes thinking, I wish there was somebody like I trusted that I could just leave here, with my daughter, so I can run home and even just like get something, and I
Yeah.
remember thinking, I hope that I can be that for you, just that friend where I can step into your shoes just for a little bit of time, so you can become two people, because that's how you feel like you need to be in that
Yeah.
situation.
Right.
Really
I
rough.
mean, it was so interesting having my daughter there every day, and people, I wondered, what are they judging the fact that I have this other 4-year-old here in my room and I'm walking around the hospital? But I was there, so she had to be there, because it wasn't like a local hospital, it was a far hospital. So she basically lived there too. But then Victor would take her home, and you're right, it was just terrible. I wasn't putting her to bed, which I had normally done. But another lesson is really look at your tribe, really look at your people who are in your life, because you were just somebody who would cry with me. Sometimes that's all we could do if there was something horrible that I was listening to.
Mm-hmm.
Some dire prognosis, which there were many, and there were
Mm-hmm.
many agonizing moments, with my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, I remember that one in particular where it was, I think, the heart surgeon who came in to discuss this heart problem and the surgery that needed to take place. And, they don't sugarcoat it. He laid
no,
it all out that day. And when he left, I mean, I remember during it actually going into the bathroom, just closing the door and just taking a minute and sort of praying. And I started to break down, and I thought, okay, well, this is not why I'm here. Like, I'm here to help you. And if I'm losing it, like, I just want it to be strong for you somehow. And I remember
well,
walking out of the
yeah.
room and saying to you after it was all over, like, you looked at me, and I wanted to say, it's going to be fine, Amanda, don't worry. And I remember all I could say was, oh my God, this is awful. The
and
truth
and
just
that was the
spit
perfect thing
right
to
out.
say,
Oh my
because
gosh.
because I remember he came in, Victor, my husband, had left, so he had a lot of things he had to tell me. Everything he told me, I had a list of questions, a little pad and paper, and I would ask him a question. His answer was horrible. Like,
It
I can only
was.
just tell you, it was the worst thing you would ever
It
want to
was
hear somebody
awful.
say about your kid. And then I would just go, all right. And I would ask the next question, and then it would be horrible. And the worst question, the question I always ask people, because my daughter, Clara, she came out of the womb wanting to be held. I had to hold her 24/7, couldn't put her down. So when she was intubated with a critical airway, no less, her head was tilted. There were pillows. She had all kinds of tubes, wires, and I wasn't allowed to hold her, of course. And that was a very painful thing. And I knew it was painful for her. I 100% knew that she was in terror. And it's why I didn't leave her alone in the room. My husband didn't leave her alone. We always had somebody who loved her with her. It wasn't even though it was critical care, we had a nurse there all of the time. We felt that we needed to also have somebody who loved her, there. But anyway, the last question, my hardest question was, when can I hold her? And, it was always no, you can't. And we don't know when you can. So that was always the question that was very debilitating for me, because I had learned not to look too much in the future. I thought, you know what? She just has to live 5 minutes from now. She just has to live, and I had learned to not say, okay, let's worry about 2 weeks from now, because they weren't giving me that, but I thought I can keep her alive tonight, and that's how it was. So I turned to you and I looked at you, and you were sitting at the little hospital desk and tears were streaming down your face. And you said, well, that was just horrible. That was just awful. And
It
it was the
was
perfect,
awful. Oh,
and it
God.
was the perfect thing for me to hear, though, because if you had said, Amanda, that's all right, that would have felt horrible, that you weren't recognizing the enormity of it. I mean, and you sat in that horror with me. And
Yeah.
that is what I needed. And I mean, I have this great tribe. I have, Lorraine and Linda, who are my two childhood friends as well, who I sometimes was sitting in the hallway and I would just alternate, because I would have tears streaming down my face. And I thought, it looks less pathetic if you're on the phone.
Mhm.
So sometimes I would want to be on the phone. So I would call one of you guys, but I really had nothing to say. And even my mother and father and sister and brother, I have this really close group. And I just think, again, that's another lesson I took away. If there's somebody in your group or in your tribe or in your circle that is causing you harm in some way, get away.
Yeah,
But
right.
if they're,
Right.
but people like you and like your friends, nurture that, take care of it, you know, call your friends, text your
Yeah,
friends.
and ask your friends for help is the thing
Yes.
too. Because,
Yes.
I know you felt like you couldn't ask me for help. I was, what, 12 hours away by car in Michigan. And, after I hung up the phone with you and, got the gist of it, I said to Jeff, I'm going to have to go there. Like, I just feel like I'm dying here, not being there. Um, Everything in our life at that moment was stable. Nothing was really happening. There's nothing he couldn't handle. And I just felt like there was no other place I wanted to be except with you during that period of time. No
Well,
other
and
place.
the other thing that you did was you would make Victor and me tea.
Well, I think a cup of tea solves everything, So even though
And
it
Victor
didn't
still
work, but
says,
believe it.
yes, as a matter of fact, he always says, don't put any milk or cream in my tea. And he said, the only person that can do that is Roseanne.
Oh,
There's
he's so
something about the
funny.
way. And that was and also I remember going home, leaving Victor there one day, and you were like, okay, we've got to do something about your hair. Cause I had been living in this sweatshirt and
Right.
it was pretty. I think I lived in the same sweatshirt for Clara actually has that same sweatshirt now. But anyway, we went home, and do you remember, Roseanne? We went to my home, and one of my neighbors who was from Iran. So he
I
didn't.
do remember this.
You remember this? He didn't speak tons
Yes.
and tons of English, but he spoke English. And he looked at me and he said, "Where have you been?" And I told him a little bit of what happened. And he looked at me and he turned around and he started slamming his hands against the car.
Yeah. It was great.
It was, and
It
you and
was
I, but
great.
well, my first instinct was, I was shocked. I was stunned that he was
Right.
slamming himself against his car. And then we just kind of mumbled something, went in, looked at each other in shock. And then we both said, well, that seemed to be like the perfect reaction.
It was appropriate. It really was appropriate. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh, it
nobody else
was.
did that. And then he came to the door with flowers but the other thing, Roseanne, so that was that time. And and even like there were things, there were doctors who thought I was wrong. I believed something. And again, it's such a long drawn out story that I don't want to get too in the weeds with it, but I had a set of beliefs, strong beliefs of how I could keep Clara alive. And the doctors didn't always agree. We didn't always agree. And there was a couple of doctors who thought I should just go home and let them do
Yeah,
what they needed to
one of them,
do.
as a matter of fact, told me that while I was there to see if I
Yes.
had any influence to get you home. And I remember saying to
Yes.
that doctor, yeah, you don't know who you're dealing with. There
No.
is no way that you are going to convince her to do anything. I've known this woman since I was 5 years old. And I'm here to tell you, if she doesn't want to do it, she isn't going to do it.
Yeah.
There's
And
nothing you
that
can say.
doctor,
Yeah.
he um
That
one
doctor
time
was difficult. Like, he was just a strange man.
he was tough because one time he said to me in one particular harrowing situation, and there were a lot, he said, we're going to have to do this surgery. And I had, all you have to do is, every day you're just staring at your child, studying, reading, staring, connecting with doctors. And I had read about the surgery they wanted to do. It had 100% mortality. It didn't have
Yeah,
99%
terrible.
mortality. It had 100% mortality. So I said, no, can't do it. And he said, well, I said, it has 100% mortality. I'm not doing that. And he said, well, she's going to die anyway.
I
You
know.
know,
He was hard to deal with.
he
He just
was
didn't
hard
have
to
a
deal with.
bedside manner, but I think he did later on. It got better with him. Did
I
it
think
not?
what happened was he thought I didn't get it. I mean, there were a
Okay.
lot of people who thought I didn't get it. He thought, his wife actually was an intensive care doctor, and she sat with me early on and she said, we're fond of your daughter and we want her to live. We really hope she does. And she started crying.
Mm,
And I looked at her and I thought, yeah, you're off the team. You're done. We're done with you. I'm happy that you're so compassionate, but you don't believe my daughter's going to live. I could feel it.
yeah.
And I thought, I don't want anybody who doesn't believe my daughter's going to live.
Hmm.
So they just had they thought she's going to die, and this woman doesn't understand it. And I always thought, even when they were surrounding me trying to convince me of something, I thought, okay, they definitely have a lot more education than this 2 years of college, which I studied going to parties essentially in my 2 years of
Right.
college.
That was a good
So
time.
yeah, you got me on the education, but you don't know her. I know her. And also, I don't have it in, I don't have the ability to believe the worst. I don't have it. So yeah, he was tough. And I do remember you seeing some interaction, and you told me later, I didn't know you were watching.
Hmm.
You came in and were watching, because it was kind of humiliating, because by the way, the other thing that
Oh,
they
I was
wanted.
so mad about it. I mean, it distressed me more than I can even tell you that day that I heard that conversation. And that was another day that I came in and I just went into the bathroom right away and was just like so angry. I didn't even know how I was going to be able to talk to you
Yeah,
or how I wanted to help, but I had
yeah,
no idea what to say. It
yeah.
was awful.
Well, what I did is I put the typical feelings you would have on a shelf, because
You
I
had
I
to.
couldn't have that feeling. And I thought, I'm going to let them think they believe I'm either stupid, crazy, or both.
Hmm.
And but the one thing that he didn't want, you had also come back after her surgery. She had open heart surgery as part of all
Right.
of this craziness. And you came back, and the other thing that they wanted to do was just have her go through withdrawal and get off these drugs. She was on a ton of drugs, medicines, because, you can't have that kind of intubation and experience without it. So one day, I'm watching her and she is just in agony and she's crying. And I said, no, and I worked out a drug schedule for her. And I said, this is how we are weaning her. You are not taking her off. She's not going through withdrawal.
No,
This little baby.
she doesn't need to suffer like that. It's
No, and she
awful.
can't breathe. She has a coffee straw for her airway.
So every time she cries, it's not what we want to have happen.
And yeah, she's going to die from withdrawal. I will deal with everything else, but and I had a whole little chart. And of course, this doctor did not like my 2 years of partying education, giving him this chart. Oh. But the great news for me was that I had a couple of doctors in my corner, and the head of critical care, he was collaborative and he was brilliant and crazy and interesting. And he supported me, and the heart surgeon,
he was supported me. Gosh, I think I fell in love with him in like one day. He was amazing.
Even my brother fell in love with him.
Yes. I mean, he was I don't know if he's still a surgeon, but he is amazing.
I think he runs a hospital in Utah, because I stalked him a little bit in case, especially in the early days, because I thought we might need him.
Yeah. He was like the best doctor I'd ever been in front of. He was, like I said, he never sugarcoated it. He told you the truth. But he did it with such compassion and caring and hope. He did it with hope. Like he never said, oh, she's going to die from this surgery. Like there was nothing, he was just so completely hopeful and confident. That's who
he was confident. You want. Yeah. And it's as we're talking about this, Roseanne, I almost think I could take a little piece of what happened and talk about that, because there were so many different things. And I don't want to take up the whole time with it. But when I think about, different things, a time I thought that one other surgeon had to be in the room at the same time, and it didn't work out. And there's a long story about it, but it was such a powerful lesson. And essentially, we went home from this whole experience with, oxygen, and we were on an every 2-hour medicine schedule. We had physical and occupational therapists. And we had still a bad prognosis. They said she's going to need that surgery, the surgery with 100% mortality.
Eventually, right. Eventually.
You will be back, and you'll be back soon. And also, by the way, she can't get a cold. If she gets a cold, she will die. So those were the things I was left with. My husband and I were left with. My family and I were left with, because I have to say, even my daughter, who was in kindergarten, one of her friends said, Gracie can't drink out of the water fountain because she might get her sister sick. It was very impactful. But when we got home, I remember one day, it wasn't when we got home, we were living this crazy life, and I was trying to get back to normal. So I was working, trying to do yoga. I was on this every 2-hour schedule. So we didn't really sleep very much. I think I killed a lot of brain cells back then. If I can't remember anything, I always blame it on that.
Yeah.
But I do remember, Roseanne, I was at the top of the steps one day, and I was thinking, everybody else can go to McDonald's, which is so weird. Like, why do I want to go to McDonald's? But I was thinking, and they can bring their kids to McDonald's, and they don't have to worry that their kid is going to get a cold and die. And I was feeling like sorry for myself and my kids. And as I took the next step, I remember thinking, wait a second, we are all in the same boat. We are all vulnerable. Life is ephemeral. All any of us have is this moment. I just have been shown it in a visceral way.
Yes.
But we're all we're all in the same boat. anything
Sure.
could happen. So
Well,
you
yeah.
do have to just like love that moment and celebrate that moment.
Yeah.
And so all of these things, and Roseanne, we have to talk sometime too, because you have many stories of your own as it relates to drama and being a mother and being a
Yeah.
mother of in a crisis situation.
Right, right. And, my daughter Hope too spent a lot of time in the hospital, in and
Yes.
out. I don't think only one time, maybe 2 nights, did I ever feel it was critical, where I actually thought we might not be taking her home. But that certainly wasn't, months and months and months like your
Yeah, but
situation. But I know how it feels. I
yes.
do. I know how it feels.
And
And
even 1 hour of that is
yeah.
life altering.
It is. I know the fear of it, and just the desperation, and how you would just do anything. You just feel like you would just do anything. But
Yeah.
there's nothing to be, there's nothing you can do. It's the worst feeling ever, and
Yeah.
it was so great being in the hospital that time with you, because we were holding Clara. That was the point where they let you hold her. And
Yes.
God bless you, Amanda, because the minute they let you hold her, she was never put down. She was
Yeah.
never put down. You held her the whole time. And if you weren't holding her, I was holding her. And if I wasn't holding her, Victor was holding her, or your sister was holding her. Somebody was
Yeah.
holding her. Like,
And you
she
know what's
was
funny about
not
that?
ever put down.
And there's something about, so my daughter had open heart surgery, then she had heart surgery, and then she we didn't want to intubate her because she had this tiny airway. They had already shaved the sides accidentally of her airway off. So she had scar tissue, and it was just a mess. And they were worried that if they intubated her, it was really hard to get her extubated. Or
Right.
no, she was intubated, but I know what happened. I think they extubated her, and she freaked. Clara was also a very strong-minded baby. So she would freak out at every turn. And it was that strength that, I think helped her to live, but it was a strength that they were panicked because they couldn't get her to breathe because she was just freaking out, and she wouldn't let them give her oxygen. And this one nurse Q, she had a really long name, so everybody called her Q. She said, let's let mom hold her, see what that
Yeah.
does. She was freaking out. And then I held her, and she stopped crying.
Mm-hmm.
She was completely calm. And it was the first time I had held her in so long. And I remember she stopped crying, and I knew that she was going to live because I could feel life. She was solid, and I could almost
Mm-hmm.
feel like the blood pumping in her veins. I could almost feel her lungs. Like, it was so, I, I can never express the feeling of that moment holding her.
Yeah, I bet.
And because I had to hold an oxygen thing. It was a tube because she wouldn't wear a mask up to
Right.
her nose
Right
and
under her
mouth.
nose the whole time.
And when
Mm-hmm.
and when I would start to fall asleep, because you get to 1 a.m, you would
Mm-hmm.
say, go sleep. And you would sit there for hours and hold her and hold the oxygen
Yeah,
on her
right. And
face.
I remember that one night you went to go lay down. You said, just wake me up in like 3 hours. I said, okay, I will. And I didn't wake you up in 3 hours. I let you sleep
No,
the whole night, and you
I
got
don't
up,
know
but
how you
you
did
were so pissed at me
it.
for not waking
That's
you up.
true.
But I thought, I
That's
don't care.
true.
I'm gonna take that hit, because
Yeah.
you did a lot of all-nighters. That was my first one, so I
Yeah.
could handle it.
Yeah.
But and then I was able to get a room at the hospital. I mean, they were so
Yes.
compassionate. And they gave
Yes.
me a room at the hospital, and I did,
They did.
get to sleep there, and
Yeah,
it was
little room. It was
great.
like only a bed. And then, they were
Yeah.
great. They actually did offer me the Ronald McDonald House. But what
Yeah, I
happened was
remember. Yeah.
I learned that if you had the Ronald McDonald House, you had to leave at, like, say, 6 or something like that. And you had to stay there. So when they offered me the Ronald McDonald House, I was like, oh, good, I can use it as a guest home for when people visit me. But you couldn't do that. You had to stay there. And I couldn't leave the room with Clara. She just was, you, there were so many reasons that somebody like my husband or me or you or my Aunt Flora or my mom, somebody always had to be with her. I had to monitor every kind of drug schedule, because if they were off even 15 minutes, everything was out of whack. And I just believed that as much as we could make perfect, I don't know, it felt like that was going to
Hmm.
help her to live, anything bad that she felt was going to. And I gotta say, it's still, that trauma still lives with me, because I probably have always been like, oh, Clara's crying. She can't cry. Even when she was
Right.
13, that's a hard
Hmm.
habit to break. It's ingrained.
Yeah.
And but the thing about this whole experience, and there are so many levels to this and incidents that we're teaching, is that when I came home and had a minute, and I didn't have a minute for years, honestly.
Right. Not much of a minute. Right.
No, I did think, what did I learn from that?
Yeah, you
What did
wanted to
that
write it
teach me?
down. Remember, you wanted to start
I
writing
Yes,
about it and writing it down.
yes,
And you,
and I
when you
did.
go through, yeah, because I've done that too.
Hmm.
When you go through a big giant trauma, best thing you can do is start to write it down.
Yeah,
And sometimes you can't write it down right away, because I couldn't. I
exactly.
had to go back a couple years later and
Yes.
then start writing about it, because it was just every time I tried to revisit it, it was just too soon, I guess. It was
It's
too
too
hard.
painful.
Yeah.
It's too painful. In the very beginning, I couldn't do it because of that. It was just too present. When I
Hmm.
really started to be able to is when I started to feel safer, because although we were told her airway could not grow, that it was physically impossible, um, although I will just add a caveat that the heart surgeon said, hey, we do not do an autopsy on everybody. We don't know the size of everybody's airway. You don't know everything. And,
Hmm.
and I thought that was
Yeah.
really great of him to
Yeah,
say,
he was really hopeful all the time. He
yes,
always had
yes,
something hopeful.
yeah.
Yes, it was
But
great.
anyway, once I started to know it had grown, I felt safer. And once I felt safer, I started to write. And then I kind of wrote like 10 lessons, that I took away. And P.S., the other thing that you and I have talked about is, although it was horrifying and painful, and we were sad and we were scared, it was also, you are living very much in the present, and every emotion is raw. So there were moments of great joy and
Oh,
laughter.
yeah. And that's a good point, because when you're going through something really, really rough, you have to surround yourself with those people that can still make you laugh. Because, like,
Yes.
I see it at like funerals I'll go to for, aunts or my uncles, and my cousins are there that I haven't seen in a long time. And we'll often say, it's so weird that we're all so happy to see each other and we're laughing. And it seems wrong to be laughing in that
Yeah.
situation, but there is laughter there, just because of the joy of kind of being together. But I mean, there were times I think that the laughter is what keeps you alive. Because I
Yeah.
mean, I still laugh, honest to God, about that one night that we were driving home from your house really late at night. Might have been the night with the Iranian guy, and we were heading back to Children's Hospital. And you had your little Bluetooth headphones in. You were driving, and I guess you were on a call with Victor. You were talking to Victor, but I didn't know you were talking to Victor. So you were saying things like, well, what time do you think we'll be there? And I was answering, well, I think it's going to be about another hour before we get there. And then you said something else, and I answered again. And this went on for minutes. And then finally you turned and looked at me and went, I'm not talking to you. My Bluetooth in. Like, oh my God, I'm answering all these questions and having a
That
conversation.
is, yes,
But
that is so funny. I
but
forgot about
we
that, but I
really,
remember it.
I mean, we laughed until we cried. It wasn't that funny,
Yeah.
honestly, but we were just needing that release, I think, and then
Yes.
we just couldn't stop laughing about that
Yes.
ridiculous moment. So
Yeah.
yeah, you do have to bring those people in that, can take you, that you can laugh hard with
Yes.
when things are
Yes.
rough. Yeah.
And I think that there was something about that experience too. I I probably I was I think I was always an authentic person to a certain extent. I really do. But there's something about that experience too, that you really do throw away artifice. You throw away the need to appear a certain way to people. There was
Right.
something about everybody thinking I was crazy and stupid.
You didn't even care. You didn't even care. Right. You did not
No,
even
I
care.
thought, you know what? It's really not about me. I have to keep this girl. I
Mhm.
don't know what I will do if I lose my child. And I am going to do whatever I can do to keep her alive and to keep my other one, with me and having joy. I mean, I would take Gracie and go, let's explore, and Victor would sit with Clara and we would go into, the diabetes area. And, it was crazy.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I think that made me throw away that need to a certain degree of hoping that people think I'm something,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, when you're dealing with such big stuff, you really drill down to
Yeah,
you just can't handle the silly stuff anymore. It just not it's too
no,
much. It's too
no,
much. So it all
no.
goes to the wayside.
Yeah,
It's a good lesson, but sadly it's a hard way to learn it. But I think that's
it
the only way to
is.
learn it.
I always get hit with that lesson. I swear, I'm like, I get it, universe. You can
I
stop putting me
know.
in these situations.
Right? Exactly.
But I do
Exactly.
always get hit with
Oh.
that lesson. So I think that along with many other things, but that was really a huge one, it left me with a desire to share a message. And
Hmm.
I think when I was home during the pandemic, I thought, okay, I'll do a magazine. But then I thought, then I have to get advertisers and, you
Right.
know. So I went on YouTube and I learned how to make a website and I just started writing stuff. I had no idea of what the website was going to be. And Julie, my youngest daughter, was my little advisor.
She is.
And
She's great.
she is. And she would, and that's how Soulful Living, because my name is Solar. And I always thought, oh, what a great last name. And Soulful Living came into being as, okay, it's my book magazine. It's really my way of saying, hey, what's your story? We all have
Right.
these stories.
Yes, Amanda. That's why you're here. I mean, that when you say, why are we doing this podcast? What's the reason
Yeah.
for it? What's its purpose? It is that. It's just to hear people's stories. And
Yeah.
we all have tons of them
Yeah.
on certain topics. You know,
Yeah.
this was
Yeah. We don't
just,
get
yeah, this
things
was
that.
your story about the illness of your daughter.
Yes.
And and that story just leads to so many important things for people to hear,
Yeah. Yeah.
so the stories, I mean, I don't think ever I can listen to one of your podcasts and think I pull something from it. Somebody teaches me something, or I go, oh yeah, that's a cool or funny thing, or that I've never heard of, that's new or different. And that's just it, we're learning from each other.
We're learning from each other. And I think, the other thing that happened during the pandemic was that I spent a lot of time for a certain period of time until I pulled away on social media. I had
Mm.
nothing else to do in the beginning. And
Mhm.
then before I created the podcast, and it's this world where we are putting, for the most part, it's one of two things. You're either saying, look how great everything is. And I get it. You normally post like, look how beautiful my kids are, or look at whatever success there was, or look, I'm having a martini in the local
Paris
bar.
or Paris, right? God dang.
You like how you think Paris and I think the local bar?
I'm not that jealous of the local bar, but if you're having a martini in Paris, I'm kind of like, I want
There
to
are
go
days
there.
I'm jealous of the local bar.
God. Oh,
And
Amanda.
I think it's not that it's bad to do that. It's just that sometimes, life is not always perfect. And sometimes it can be off-putting to see this perfection everywhere when we're living our own messy lives. And so there was also this part of me that wanted to talk and just be real.
Yes, Because we do look at social media. I mean, I've told you about the time that I went off Facebook. I'm like, I'm done. I'm out. I'm off. I can't take it anymore because it made me feel bad. It
Yeah.
just made me feel bad. I was looking at it and I couldn't help but compare, my life to what I was seeing. And I know what I'm seeing is the truth. Like these people really are in Paris and they really do have, they're showing, their kids and their successes and this is all true. This is not, they're not making it up. So, and I want to see that. I don't mean to say that I don't want to see that. I do
Right.
enjoy seeing that. Like I love to see your vacation pictures, Amanda, or
Right.
but I think when things are harder in your life at that moment, like I just vividly remember I wrote about it that night. I jumped on my computer and did it. Titled it my Facebook rant because that night I was home alone in my house. It was like the middle of June. We're still living in Washington, which I am not happy about. And it was like 45 degrees and
Mm.
raining. And, I'm in my sweaters and nobody was home and it was dark and cold and dreary. And I'm on Facebook and I'm seeing, this friend's in Paris and this one's at the beach and this one's at her beach home here and there. And I'm seeing all this and I'm coveting it. I'm thinking, why is that not my life? Why is that not my
Right.
story? Or I want that, but I don't have that right now. And it makes you forget what you really do have and the good that you do have. That of course I do appreciate. I have so much, I do appreciate it, but I just started to compare and I was jealous. It was
Yeah.
that's bottom line. It was just complete jealousy.
Yeah.
And then I thought, yeah, I have to step away from this for a while because I'm leaving this platform feeling bad, just feeling bad for myself.
Right.
So I'm out. I'm just going to
Well,
step
I
away
have to
for a
tell
few
you,
months. So I did.
1 year, I wanted to do this Christmas card 1 year. You know how people send those long Christmas cards like, Joe got his master's in blah,
Right.
blah, blah. And
Yep.
then we went to Paris and then we came back. So I said, and then we ran a marathon and, so I wanted to do this Christmas card and we have one picture where we're all like on a hill. And I'm like, we went mountain climbing. And then I told my mom she was going to have to lay in bed with the covers pulled up to her chin. And I was going to hold soup up to her. And I was going to say, we fed the elderly. and,
Oh.
and all of these things. Right. And then when you open up the last page, I said to Victor, we'll all be in our pajamas laying on the couch with Cheetos like all around and say, no, seriously, we just stayed on the couch
Right.
eating Cheetos and watching television, but we're going to do all those things next year.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
But he wouldn't do it. Pitchers thought that, I thought it was a great idea, Roseanne, but he
Oh,
wasn't
it's
so
funny.
enamored of it.
It's so funny.
The other thing though, too, that happens in Facebook is that, and probably, Instagram and wherever, is that the anger. There's
Right.
also this kind of thing where somebody will post something. They either believe something or they have an opinion or here's a news story. And then people will rant and rave in the comments section,
Yes.
they'll
Yes.
disagree.
Yeah.
And I also thought, well, can we just have a discussion? Do
Hmm.
we have to be so angry? You
Well, yeah,
know?
and you gotta know you're not changing somebody's mind on Facebook. Like if
Yeah,
they've got something they're saying, your comment is not going to change their mind. I mean,
right,
you're not doing it. It's worthless to even try because you are
right.
not changing what they think. No
That's right.
way. No
And
way.
there have been occasions where I'll say, here's a news story or here's what I think I've posted. But if
Mhm.
somebody disagrees, I don't, I already have put what I thought. I'm not going to go back at them. If
Right.
you decide that you need to say, I disagree with you, Amanda, all right, but I'm not going to,
No, we're
you
not
just
having
read
a
what I,
Facebook comment
right.
fight.
No, exactly. It's so crazy. So I think that I had never even listened to a podcast when, I moved from the website into the podcast world. I started with my friend Natalie doing Two Moms and a Microphone. And I'd never had heard a podcast and I just hit record and we just started talking. And that's, Roseanne, where you come in Well, first of all, no, it's not immediately where you came in, because there was another thing. When I did this website, I thought people are, once again, I thought people are going to think, what is she talking about? What is she doing? Soulful living? What a goofball. And I thought, yeah, that's probably true. But you know what? I'm doing it anyway. If I'm not doing it now, then when am I going to do it? When I'm 95, you know? I'm here, I'm home, I'm doing it. And I did call and I talked to you and you were like, oh, that's a good idea. And I was so thankful for that.
Yeah, it was a good idea because we all are hard on ourselves and we think, oh, people are going to think, why am I doing this? Why do I think I should do this? But actually, we don't think that. You think we think that, but we don't.
Right.
So that's where you get in your own way.
Right. And there might be people who think that, and they're not your people.
That's right.
You
Yeah.
know, I mean, there might be people, you know, that's again, that's surrendering. I don't need everybody to get me, you
Hmm.
know, as long as
Hmm.
there are a few. And then when we started, Natalie and I, doing the podcast, you were so helpful because you do listen to podcasts
I
and
do because I used to
you,
drive a lot. I mean, I was on the
yes,
road 3 hours a day at least. So for me, podcasts or book tapes, but I really got into finding different varieties of podcasts. Um, and yeah, I listened to a ton of them.
and
Absolutely, on
that
all
was
different
really great
topics. Yeah.
because you would say, you know, Amanda, you can stop laughing or something, like if I was laughing the whole time, you know,
Right,
or
right.
or you said, you know, a lot. Probably I've said it even in this
Well, remember when we got
podcast.
into the word interesting for a while?
Oh my
That
gosh,
was your
guess
favorite
what?
word for a long time. Oh, that's
Can I
interesting.
I still hear myself do it. So
Yeah,
for
but
all of you people listening, I know, I know.
interesting. It's so interesting.
It's such, and you would say, well, why is it interesting? At
Yeah,
least
I'm
say
like, just
why it's
follow up on
interesting.
that. That's so
Yeah,
interesting. Tell me more. That's always a good thing to
yeah,
say. When you
yeah,
say that's so interesting, tell me more.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it became a comma and
Hmm.
a,
A
you know,
filler.
yeah,
Yeah.
it
And
it
in
did.
an interaction because you are communicating with that other person on the Zoom or in front of you at your table. So yeah, you do have to have something
Yeah,
to say to keep them
yeah.
talking.
But it's
Sure.
been really helpful because then Natalie and I stopped our podcast. We took a sabbatical from it, and Natalie got back into her business, which was starting to really take off. And I went into this podcast, and you were just so helpful from the get-go. From, you know, Bill, the wonderful Bill Aronson, wrote the theme song and used the word connections. And we talked early on about soulful connections, but then I thought it was too earnest and I kept trying to be funny. I kept wanting the title to be funny.
You had some cute titles. You did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
They were
then
cute. They were clever. But yeah.
yes, yes. But then ultimately, for whatever reason, they didn't make sense. So we just said, well, we're just going to call it Soulful Connections so that we can move on.
Well, yeah, the titles didn't speak to what you were really doing,
They
which
really
is
didn't.
connecting people to people. Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
hearing their
Connecting
stories. And
our stories, connecting
Mhm.
meaning to our stories, connecting our stories to meaning. And really, you and I talked, and, you know, we were saying, I know that life isn't always going to be happy. I'm okay with the fact that I would love it to be always happy, but it's just not going to be. But I do want it to always be meaningful. You
Right.
know, it's not
Right.
going to be a laugh riot every minute, but I do want to have meaning.
Hmm.
And I think that that's part of the whole podcast and the website and all of my conversations. I can't stand talking about things that don't have any relevance to life and why we're here.
Right. Right. Because you're right. Life is full of joy and sorrow. And you're going to get both. Your
Yeah.
life's going to give you both. And I say that to my kids a lot. Like, it's not all going to be rosy. Death happens, illness happens, tragedy happens. It will happen to you. It will. Can't avoid it. So, how do you walk through those difficult, sorrowful times?
Yeah.
and get through them, because you're going to have to, because it's not all going to be peachy. And, I think that that's where, by listening to each other and listening to each other's pain, and I know sometimes I've heard somebody's story and I'll think, God, I just never knew that they were going through that. Or
Yeah.
I can't believe how they came out of that. That inspires me, and
Yeah.
it's just important to hear where people are at. It
Yeah.
is. And sometimes it's just, they're talking about a venture they're in or a job they're doing. And that's all equally as important. It doesn't have to be a deep down, sorrowful dive
Well,
in,
that
but
and that's so true. I mean, some of it it is fun to connect with one another. It's
yes,
really people are interesting.
they
We're
are.
here, we're all here. So let's try to figure it out. Like, why are we here? What's happening? What are you doing to find meaning in your life? And what do you do to find joy in your life? And how do you hit a rough spot and keep moving? And
Right.
so on and so forth. So I guess that, sometimes I think I learned I think I learned it during the pandemic. I'm just doing it. I'll ask questions later.
Right.
So
Just
some of
do
the
it.
website
Hmm.
and the podcast, I'm figuring it all out as I go, but I want to do it. It's that simple. And because I want to, I'm doing it. But I think there's a lot of fun things that we can do. And in the meantime, um, I'm so happy, Roseanne, that you're such an amazing friend who, we met in first grade. And I don't always talk a lot about the soul and soulful. People are so uncomfortable with any talk of, spirit or something that's bigger than just
Yeah, it means
something
something
tangible.
different to most people, and that's why it
Yes.
feels a little awkward, maybe. Yeah.
Right. And I don't
Hmm.
even know, some days it means something different to me one day than it does the next.
Right. Right.
But
Right.
there are certain people with whom you really do have a soulful, an
Hmm.
SOUL full connection. And that is my connection with you. And it started early before we could really, you know,
Yeah, there's
make a
something
decision.
really special about having a friend from childhood,
Yeah.
because we don't really have to explain anything to one another. We know exactly where we've both been. We know where
Yes.
we come from. We know our parents, who our parents are. We know our brothers and sisters. It's like we
Yes.
totally have lived in each other's households. Literally,
Yes.
we have both lived in each other's households. We've walked almost in each other's shoes for a lot of our life.
Yes.
When I got my serious boyfriend, you were all a part of that. When you got your serious boyfriend,
Yep.
I was all a part of that. And yeah, I mean, it's like we just have this endless history. But
Yeah.
I've met really great friends in my older age. They have no idea who I was as a kid.
Yeah.
They have no idea what
Right.
games we played. And, we share teachers, and like I said, we share parents.
Yeah.
Like when I see your parents now, like your dad, when I see your dad, I mean, it just brings tears to my eyes, because it's like seeing my dad again, because since I don't have my dad
Yeah.
any longer, and he's equally like feels like a father to me.
Yep.
So, and your mom feels like a mother to me. So
Yeah.
it's an amazing thing to have. It really is. And we
It's an
have that not just
amazing.
with each other, but like with Linda and Lorraine too.
Yes.
We know each other's stories. There's
Oh,
no,
it's so true. I mean,
yeah,
it is really, really true. When you have those, Linda and I grew up on in the same neighborhood. So
right. And
we have known
interestingly
each other
about that,
since.
Amanda, like growing up, I wasn't really friends with Linda. I don't know
Right. And
why, but we just never were really friends in grade school
yeah,
for some reason,
yes.
and really didn't reconnect until after we had gotten out of school.
Yeah.
And then we were able to reconnect. But how funny is that, in a small little classroom, that we were never really friends?
Well, and
So
it makes
it's
sense. I
funny.
mean, the thing is that's you see it with our own kids. You're not always friends with everybody. And I had, different friendships. Like it wasn't like you, me, Lorraine, and Linda hung out together.
Yeah, we
I
didn't.
hung out with you guys individually.
Hmm.
And Linda, because she grew up in my neighborhood, she would just walk over to my house or I would walk over to her house. But there is really something, even when you haven't. I mean, there are people in our first grade class, or even, eighth grade class at this point, that even if we weren't close, you still have that shared history that is palpable and powerful. There's something about, though, having close friends and close family, where when bad things happen, or when people, sometimes people think the worst of you for whatever is happening in your life. People can misjudge you, or maybe even judge you correctly. And that correct judgment is something that doesn't sit well with them for whatever reason. I can always say, well, my mom and dad love me. My
Hmm.
closest friends love me. That actually is almost like a suit of armor. That deep relationship is very powerful. And I don't think if I were to give advice to anybody who doesn't have that in their life, I would say cultivate it. Reach out, make friends, share who you are, because the truth is,
Yeah, share the truth. And that's when you connect with people.
it's true.
When you tell them the real, then you
You
connect with them. Yeah,
a
for
a
sure.
100%. If you are putting on this veneer that we do, we all want to make it look like everything's great for some reason.
Mhm.
It's this weird thing. Then you're probably not going to get close, because until you share your vulnerabilities or really who you are, I don't know that you can really connect,
It's
right?
true. It's true. And that you talk about that soul connection, and that's true because when I remember when Jeff's mother died and you had walked into her funeral, and I was really holding it together, and you walked in and I burst into tears as soon as I saw you. Just lost it.
Yeah.
And Kathy, our yoga teacher, was standing right next to us, if you remember when this happened. And I leaned over to Kathy and I said, gosh, I was doing so good till she walked in, kind of as a joke. And she said, oh, yeah, Roseanne, there's people like that in your life. They just bring out the truth, don't they? They just bring out the real reality and the real deepness of who you are. That's
Yes.
you too. So that's the truth of the matter. You can put on this,
Yes.
you can be
Oh
putting on that
yeah.
happy face, and then that person that you really are connected with, they know, or they
Oh
bring out
yeah.
the real truth of it. So
Right.
yeah.
And it's safe. To me also, it's a safe place. Like, once you see that
Yes,
person,
yes.
you're immediately safe to be exactly with your feelings.
Right, to feel
you
exactly what
know?
you're really feeling. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh,
Yeah, it's very special. But yeah, so that's what the Soulful Connection is all about, for sure. And it's been really fun to listen to all the people that you've talked to, and just hear different voices and their stories, and their
yeah.
opinions and their ideas. It's nice. It's really
Well,
nice
I'm
to
so
listen
thankful
to.
that you're there, because we do connect after many of them. And it really, I just, it's the best, because it's collaborative.
Hmm.
I'm there talking, but you're still a part of it. And, my sister's still a part of it. I connect with her. And I just have these people that are just really, I'm so lucky. I mean, I really am so, so
Yeah.
fortunate.
And I like having these soulful conversations like this, where it's
Yes.
not, because a lot of the time you're kind of interviewing somebody to some
Yes.
degree, getting them to talk, and it's nice to have more of a conversation
Yeah.
sometimes
Yeah.
about something or about a topic, or and sometimes you and I will talk about a podcast you just had, and we'll have a
Yes.
conversation about it, and
So we'll
sort
have
of
to do
the
more of
follow up.
that,
Yeah.
because Roseanne, the other thing is, I want to talk about some different, when I see a movie or a show or a news event, it kind of also
Yes.
sparks. So I think we'll have more soulful conversations as part of the Soulful Connections podcast.
Yeah, it's
And
fun. Just like you and
yeah,
I were talking about that Netflix show that you were watching, the one about
yes,
the murder, the Mormons, and
yes,
I haven't
yes,
gone through it yet, but yeah, once I get through it, we should talk about it because
we should.
it's
Yeah, I
really
have a lot to
disturbing.
say.
Like it's
Oh, it's
really
disturbing, but I have a lot to say that I
disturbing.
won't even say it, because
Right.
stay tuned, people.
That
I'm
would be
going to
worth
end
talking
this.
about. Yeah.
I'm going to end the podcast, but I'll stay on with you. But I really appreciate it, because, Roseanne, just allowing me to even talk about that situation with Clara, um, really feeds into why this podcast, along with, some
It
other things,
does.
but
It does,
it
Amanda.
really
And a lot of
does.
time you reference it. And I think it's good
Mhm.
for people to know what happened,
Yes,
what happened here. And I mean, it was a big, big deal. It,
it
it
really
really
was. I
affected
mean,
your whole life moving forward, even.
it
So,
affected all of us. I mean, Clara was
mhm.
just given the all clear sign really 3 years ago when she
Yeah, it's
turned,
like
when she,
it's a miracle,
yeah,
truly
yeah.
a
So when she was
miracle.
13, we were told, you're good, you're good. But it was living, and believe me, I didn't need them to tell me it was all good, in the sense that I really had faith, as did Victor, and as did our, family and close friends. We all believed it. But there is something really, oh, freeing and liberating and wonderful about people saying, yeah, you're good now.
Hmm.
She's gonna survive. And now we do still work on just quality of life issues, um and but that's a luxury. The fact that we
Right.
can worry about quality of life now. And she's great and beautiful and feisty, and she's
Yeah.
a unique person,
Perfect.
as are,
Yeah. She's perfect.
um my other two,
Hmm.
all of our kids, Grace, and because Grace, that's a whole other story, what Grace went through as um a little girl growing up with that,
Of
and
course. Yeah. It
and
affects your
even
whole family.
Julie, like, I started to realize I didn't give Julie swimming lessons for the longest time because I was so nervous about getting Clara swimming lessons, because again, that cold that we were trying to prevent with her.
Hmm.
And then
Yeah.
I treated Julie often as though she couldn't get a cold. The same fears were kind of into the way I raised her. So, it was a big family thing, and it did color a lot of my life, but it also helped me to really fully embrace joy.
Hmm.
I really understand that if your family is alive, and if you're alive, there is reason for joy,
Yeah, I
you
get that
know?
too. I get that too. And I missed that for a long time
Yes.
until the shit hit the fan, right?
Right.
So, right?
Right. We
Yeah.
have so much. So a future
Hmm.
podcast, Roseanne, you can talk more about that when
Yes,
when you're ready to do
I
that.
will. I
So,
will. Yep.
okay. Well, thank you.